anybody doing any testing. Not that they ride the bus together to get out there. Oh, many of them do. But, yeah, it's not going to affect us. That's the attitude I'm hearing. I'm seeing it. I'm seeing a lot of people bury their heads in the sand. I have a feeling if you're informed, you wouldn't be doing this. I think people are hearing what they want, listening to what they want right here with Chat on Demand. You will hear the real stuff, the guts of it. We look at the Las Vegas Review-Journal this morning. Boy, yesterday afternoon, more than 100 airline flights canceled Thursday amid a shutdown triggered when an air traffic controller tested positive. Now, the FAA ordered the air traffic control tower to be temporarily shut down, so it was. All those flights suspended. It will affect your world, and it's only going to get deeper, only getting into the thick of it, not even close yet. And people with the nonchalant attitude. I don't know if it's just here in Nevada. I listened to, Wyoming radio station this morning, California radio station, a couple of buddies of mine. It seems that people are just not taking it really serious. I sure hope you do. And I want to thank you for being here. We'll keep you up to date with accurate information. We've got breaking news right now, as it looks as though the Treasury Secretary says the tax filing deadline has now been moved to July 15th. This is all happening in real time right now on the 20th day of March. July 15th. Wow. I would expect to be in it for the long haul. I talked to a couple of teachers today who said, no, we'll be back to work after 30 days. Everything's going to be fine. I would expect that kids probably don't go back to school this year. What about people who are supposed to graduate? What about those kids in college with no jobs, going to school? It's crazy. This will radically alter our lives. The entire United States, even if it was just for 30 days, it's going to alter our lives. The reason I'm not doing the podcast that I was gonna do is because we don't live in that world anymore. Not 2 months ago, not even a week ago. A story I read this morning. Headline reads, Coronavirus will radically alter the U.S. When Jason Christie, chief of pulmonary medicine at Penn Medicine, got projections on the coronavirus and how many patients might soon be flocking to his Philadelphia hospital, he said he felt ill. He said they saw how quickly that the surge would overwhelm the system, forcing doctors to make impossible choices. Which patients would get ventilators? Which patients would get beds? Which patients would die? They were terrified. And that, he said, was the best case scenario. Experts around the country have been churning out model after model, marshaling every tool from math, medicine, science, and history, all trying to predict what's going to happen, the coming chaos unleashed by the new coronavirus, and to make preparations for it. And they said the same thing that I told you earlier. At the heart of this algorithm, a scary but empowering truth is what happens next really depends on us, our government, politicians, health institutions, and really the 328 million inhabitants of this country, all making these decisions on a daily basis. You have to outsize the consequences for our collective future. In the worst case scenario, America is on a trajectory to award 1.1 million deaths. These numbers, they're staggering. That model envisions the sick pouring into hospitals, overwhelming even makeshift beds in parking lots and tents. Doctors would have to make agonizing decisions about who gets scarce resources. They're already saying they are running low. They're screaming to them right now saying, hey, we're gonna run out. Trusting government, already tenuous. That would erode even further should we get even more down this slippery slope. Now, that grim scenario by no means a foregone conclusion, but as demonstrated by countries such as South Korea, which has reduced its new cases a day from hundreds to dozens, aggressive steps. If Americans embrace maybe some of these drastic restrictions and the school closures, for instance, we could see a death toll closer to the thousands maybe breathe a collective national sigh of relief as we prepare for a grueling but surmountable road ahead. That's an alarming new model. Americans, we got to flatten that curve. You know, the experts have not always made clear is that applying all that downward pressure on the curve by canceling public gatherings, closing schools, quarantining the sick, enforcing social distancing, you elongate the curve. You stretch it out over a longer period of time. Success means a longer, though less catastrophic fight against the coronavirus. And it's unclear whether Americans who built this country on ideals of independence and individual rights and I'm going to do what I want, are we willing to endure these restrictions, maybe for months, let alone a year or more? This is real stuff. Chad on Demand, the Keeping It Real podcast. This month began with the U.S. recommending actions such as hand washing, social distancing, and then Sunday, you turn on the TV, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention was warning against gatherings of 50 plus. Monday, Trump made an abrupt turn from encouraging Americans to go on with their lives to say, hey, work from home. Don't get into groups of more than 10. And he called on local officials, close the schools, close the bars, close the restaurants. Getting the public to comply, kind of difficult. Saw somebody, I've been on hiatus. I haven't even been on Facebook, but I heard one of the people here in Elko was encouraging people to go to their bar. Wait, are you not paying attention? Now, Trump's sudden shift was driven by an alarming new scientific model. You don't want to see this one. This was developed by the British, and it was shared with the White House, and the scientists bluntly stated that the coronavirus is the most serious respiratory virus threat since the 1918 flu pandemic. If no action to limit the viral spread were taken, you're looking at 2.2 million people in the United States dying over the course of this pandemic. And that's according to the epidemiologist Neil Ferguson and others at the Imperial College, and they are part of the COVID-19 response team. I would listen to what they have to say. Adopting some mitigation strategies to slow the pandemic, such as isolating those suspected of being infected, social distancing, especially in the elderly. That only cuts the death toll in half. 1.1 million people they are predicting dying doing what we're doing now. But they don't tell you that, do they? Only by enacting an entire series of drastic, severe restrictions could Americans even shrink its death toll further. Now, this is all according to that study. Now, that strategy would require, are you ready? At a minimum, the nationwide practice of social distancing, home isolation, and school and university closures, and they'd have to be maintained, at least intermittently, until a working vaccine is developed, which could take 12 to 18 months at best. At best. The report's conclusion? This is the only viable strategy. That's where we're at, folks. Didn't hear that on the news, did you? No? So what hospital planning tells us is there's another thing that hasn't been spelled out in our national conversation about flattening this curve. There's going to probably be more than one curve. If we're lucky, the coming months will probably look less like a mountain, more like a string of bumpy hills. But if authorities ease the measures in coming months, or if we start letting them slip ourselves, the hill could turn right back into that exponential curve that has cratered Italy's health system and that U.S. officials are desperately trying to avoid. Climbing this first hill is going to be very challenging. All of us. It's got me shaking. Why is it so challenging? Let me tell you why. Because it involves persuading people to change their behaviors for an abstract larger good. And because no one knows how far we are actually from the peak. Nobody knows, but nobody wants to listen. On Tuesday morning, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo said infections in his state expected to peak not for 45 days. The state has roughly 53,000 hospital beds, including 3,000 intensive care beds, way short of that projected need for as many as twice that number. 11 times the number of ICU beds. A day earlier, Northwell Health, they've got 23 hospitals, 800 outpatient centers. They make up New York's largest health system. They canceled all elective surgeries to free up staff and space. It has 5,500 beds. They're 3 times short. A headline that caught my eye. Pandemics aren't just physical. I looked at that and said, I got to read that. Because I haven't known how to feel. How about you? Kind of sinking in, isn't it? A little bit of shock. The more I read, the more I'm informed, the better I feel. Not that I feel any better about the situation, but I feel, at least I know what's going on, know what to expect. You know, as America enters unfamiliar territory here, we always glimpse back in history to kind of see what to expect in the months ahead. Now, initially, nobody wanted to talk about comparing this to the 1918 flu pandemic, the deadliest in modern history. This was where it infected roughly, a third of the world's population, killed at least 50 million people, and 675,000 of those were in the United States. Yeah. But now, they're saying, like the bumpy hills some foresee coming in the months, that 1918 pandemic hit America in 3 waves. A mild one in the spring, deadliest in the fall, final one that winter. And then with each wave, it was a cycle of denial, devastation, community response finally kicking in, followed by finger-pointing, blame, lies. Every outbreak is different. This according to Monica Shope-Spana. She's an anthropologist. She spends months digging through archives to study how 1918 flu played out in Baltimore. You're not going to like this. Like the coronavirus is likely to do, the 1918 flu overwhelmed hospitals, unable to get help. Families waited outside, begged, tried to bribe doctors for treatment. In a 3-week period, 2,000 died in Baltimore alone. Mortuaries ran out of caskets. Bodies finally reached cemeteries. The gravediggers were so ill, there was no one to bury them. Economic pressure on business owners and workers caused the public to resist adopting restrictions. Economic pressure. We're going to stay open. We gotta keep going. Nobody's going to get sick. We're in Elko. Stop it, people. The crisis brought out the best in Baltimoreans. Sewing circles. They churned out gauze masks. Hospital bedding. Neighbors donated food. It also brought out the worst. Xenophobic conspiracy theories that nurses of German extraction were deliberately infecting people. That African American patients were kept out of most hospitals under Crow-era segregation. Pandemics aren't just physical, said School-Spana. They bring with them an almost shadow pandemic of psychological and societal injuries as well. And I think that's where we're heading. Thank you for listening. You've been listening to Chad on Demand. It's the podcast that keeps it real. Be safe out there. Stay informed. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, @HardyMedia. Comments, feedback. We'll be back tomorrow. Another update. There'll be a lot more to talk about. Thanks for listening.